evening and welcome to Mediumship as Ancestral Remembrance. I am Melody Capote, Executive Director of the Caribbean Cultural Center, African Diaspora Institute, known to many as CCCADI or Kadi. The center is located at 120 East 125th Street in El Barrio, East Harlem. And we invite you to visit with us as we reopen to the public for in-person programming beginning this month with our Black music series entitled Rhythm, Bass, and Place. For a schedule of all upcoming events, and there are many, we ask you to visit our website at cccadi.org. That's 3 C's, cccadi.org. Tonight's community panel discussion is a part of our Sacred Traditions program series. The Sacred Tradition programs that we present are dedicated to advocating for the education and preservation of African-based spirituality. CCCADI has been doing this work since 1976, accurately elevating our spiritual communities as a tool toward achieving cultural equity and racial justice for the African diaspora. Built into the fabric of our institution is the honoring of our ancestors, their belief systems, and creating space for us to gather in community and explore our spiritual connections. As we recognize Women's History Month now in March, we are reminded of the power of our maternal orishas, the mother of the sea, Yemaya, and Oya as guardian of the cemetery, to Oshun, Orisha of the rivers and sweet waters. In honor of the love, strength, and divinity passed down to us maternally, we invite you to support our donor campaign in praise of our mothers. We encourage your contributions to assure that we can continue to present these programs on African belief systems and traditions. To do so, just go to our website, cccadi.org, and simply click the donate button and give. Every donation is greatly appreciated and much needed. Now on to our program. Mediumship as Ancestral Remembrance, where we will discuss the relationship between our material world and the realm of spirit. Our moderator, Marinieves Alba, is a longtime friend of the center and has worked with us in various capacities throughout the years. Most recently, she served as consultant and lead facilitator of our artist training program known as DEAR, and is an advisor to our Sacred Traditions program. Mari, I'm going to turn it over to you. And I want to welcome you and the members and viewers and panelists. And thank you for supporting the Caribbean Cultural Center, African Diaspora Institute. Enjoy the program.
Thank you so much, Melody. I'm so happy to be with you again this evening. This is a really exciting program for so many reasons. It has been actually decades since the Caribbean Cultural Center, African Diaspora Institute did a program that was exclusively focused on the spiritual traditions of the African diaspora that are rooted more deeply in ancestor veneration, and also the profound and universal connection to spirit that informs our relationship to our God and our gods across traditions and faiths. So this evening, we're not going to be speaking about a particular religion or religious practice, but more a foundational spiritual practice that has, essentially traverses all of the borders across the planet, across Indigenous and African communities and all over the world. Spiritual mediumship, right? Or the gift of prophecy, the gift of dreams, that which we know as clairvoyance or claircognizance, right? The ability to just know something. Clairsentience, the ability to feel something. Clairaudience, the ability to hear across the line between the living and the dead, right? Across the lines between our material world, our secular world, and the spirit world are all gifts that humanity, we believe ultimately as spiritists, that all of humanity potentially has the ability to access in a variety of different ways and to a variety of different degrees through spiritual development and grounding and prayer and other practices that, again, cut across the lines of all traditions and faiths. And so this evening, we're really, really pleased and honored to bring you the voices of 3 spiritual mediums from across traditions, across geographies, and across cultural backgrounds and ethnicities. reminding us all that access to spirit is a universal gift, blessing, and opportunity for us all. Some would argue if you sort of follow or understand what's happening across indigenous cultures in both the Americas and on the continent of Africa, and even in places like Asia, we'll often hear a call, right? We'll hear a call, a return to the ancestors, to ancestor veneration, but not just to ancestor veneration, to the ways of the ancestors, to the ways of connection to nature, to the ways of connection to healing. And so tonight we're going to have a community discussion. This event is not intended to be instructional. This event is not intended to offer spiritual guidance per se. We are really going to use this opportunity to just listen and use the lives and experiences of these three mediums who we have the honor of being in conversation with, to allow those of you that are on with us to really perhaps have some mirroring, right? Some reflections of what you might be experiencing in your own world, and to see also what is possible, right? Through deep connection to spirit. And so with that, I'd love to invite our very first panelist, Nancy Martinez. Right. Nancy has been working with spirit since she was 5 years old. She is also a priestess in the Yoruba tradition, a priestess of Yemaya, and a Native American elder. For over 3 decades, Nancy has conducted spiritual masses, smoke lodge gatherings, and most recently, she has been doing a monthly shamanic session via technology with participants from as far away as Australia and Ireland and other parts of the world. She's a psychic teacher, an advisor, and a healer. And she works with ancestors and spirit guides who do physical and paranormal healing work through her. She is very honored to wear the sacred buffalo headdress in Native American traditional ceremonies. Mm-hmm. So thank you so much, Nancy, for being with us. Nancy is joining us from upstate New York, sacred indigenous land. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you for having me here today. This is very special. I'm honored to be here. It's amazing. It's women's also, and I'm glad to see a gentleman because it's always good to have the balance. Even when I do women's lodges, I have a male firekeeper, because it balances everything when we're working. So if you have any questions for me, I'm here to answer them.
Absolutely. I'll be asking all of you plenty of questions after we bring on our panelists. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
From the sacred lands of California, we have with us this evening Afimaye Galarraga. Afimaye is a well-respected spiritualist, medium, ancestral healer, and is also an Afro-Cuban Lukumi religious leader with over 29 years as a medium and a Palo Mayombe and Lukumi priest. His spiritual blessings and teachings are based upon his life experiences and the teachings passed down through generations of a family with a very rich history. Through his upbringing alongside respective leaders of wisdom and the influence of Allan Kardec's teachings, which we will talk about, Afimaye works with clients to help them unlock what is within. So thank you so much, Afimaye, for joining us. And Nancy is right. This was a very difficult panel to fully curate because while there are many, many male practitioners, often they live under the radar, right? And they don't like to come forth in these practices or often aren't seen as often laboring in these practices as women. And so we're very blessed and grateful, Afimaye, that you agreed to join us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. And it's definitely a deep pleasure to be part of this discussion with such powerful beings, and especially on the topic such as mediumship, which to me is evidence of the fact that we are all, as human beings, we are all magic on this earth. We are all medicine to this universe. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Afi. And so finally, I have the pleasure joining us from Houston, Texas, Kadi Janna, a Lukumi priestess, medium, and energy worker. Kadi is also a holistic intimacy coach and founder of the Pleasure Alchemy, a self-care focused community centered around women's pleasure and spiritual development. She has a bachelor's degree in liberal arts from the New School and currently resides in Houston, where she is building communities for women who are trying to align with their spiritual power, and whom she's seeking to not only help to heal and guide, but also teach around what happens after the reading, right? We live in this world where technology has helped for all of these practices to proliferate and travel widely. And often in our culture, right, people want transactions. They want the reading, the experience, the event. And so you are guiding folks in thinking about how to move beyond single transactions into a way of consciousness. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for having me today. And I'm honored to be among such an amazing group of people, mediums. And thank you to everyone who joined today. You know, like so many of us, I had no idea I would be even doing this work. So, you know, it's amazing to be able to help people in this way. And, you know, I always say, I wish I had me when I was a little bit younger. I wish there was someone like me to help guide me on the path. But everyone has their destiny, right? Mm-hmm. But, you know, if I could do a small part, if I can make some impact in our community, then that's my purpose.
Thank you, Kadi, for being with us. So I've had interesting bits of conversation with each of you. Obviously, some of you have you all actually have very public lives as well, where you channel a lot of your spiritual work. And so the first question that I want to kind of invite you into is, when did you know? When did you become aware? And actually, even before we go there, what does it mean? I've talked a little bit about the different types of mediumship, right? The fact that there are many different types of mediumistic gifts that people might have or develop. But when did you all become aware that you were what we would now call mediums? We don't all necessarily call ourselves mediums either. Mm-hmm. When did you become aware of your abilities? How were those abilities developed? And what did you do? What were the sort of, you know, things that you needed, or who were the people, for example, that you had to guide you as you became aware of what was living in your body and in your consciousness? Because the other thing I want to highlight is we talk about mediumship, and we've often failed to kind of say explicitly that it's an embodied practice, right? There's so much about being a medium that's about what lives in your consciousness, but also Nancy was sharing a story with us. It's also about what lives in your body. So when did you become aware? And how were you guided into this lifelong mission? Because it's a mission, right? And I'd like to invite Nancy to respond first.
Okay. My mom tells me I was 3 years old, and you know, I'm proud to say it. I'll be 73 this year. But when I was 3 years old, they used to go to the centros, you know, to the for the misas, you know, to get help, spiritual help. And the kids will be in the back playing. Then they have literally rows of chairs or pews. And then somebody in the front, and there was this lady who had actually, I call it the hot seat that requested, you know, to be up front there. And I was more at the table where the mediums were, my hand and my eyes barely over the table. I was more interested on what was on the table and looking at the mediums. And then every time the lady who was in the hot seat, I'll say hot seat, she would moan. Her body was in pain. She would moan. And then they said every time she moaned that I would look back at her and then look back at the table. And then at a certain time that I went over to her, she had her arms on the arms of the chair, and that I put my hands on top of her arm. And then she stood up, she screamed because she could feel the energy from my hands. She said it went up to her head and then down her whole body and out her feet. You know, and that it was like a flushing. My mother said it was like a flushing, and that pain or whatever was inside of her came out. And then all the mediums at the table, they stood up and said, "Whose child is this?" And my mother was like one of the rows in the back, and nurture what she has. Nurture what she has. And that they all at the same time said, "She belongs here and they all knocked on, ay carajo, a ver si es verdad, that they all knocked on the table and said, she belongs here. You know, she belongs here. And the rest is history. My mother taught me, and cleaning the house, and she was with the salmedia with the incense in the front, and I was behind her with the holy water sprinkling. When she said, we're cleaning the house today, open up all the closets, open up underneath the kitchen sink, everything, and sprinkle the water. And she told me, for me, I always remember my first lesson, because negative spirits like to hide in dark places. Yeah. So I would be sprinkling the water through the house, and you learn rolling the coconuts. I mean, my mother taught me a lot. But my father also, even though he didn't go to the centro, my father used to do, my hair was down to my waist, and my father used to do my 2 braids. And he would say to me, no deje que nadie te diga, I'll translate in a minute, no deje que nadie te diga que tú no eres India. Tú eres Taíno Arawak. Tú eres Taíno, tú eres mi India. So my father was the one that taught me about the native part. You know, when my mother me enseñó el espiritismo, and my father taught me my native side. You know, Mari, my father is your complexion. Él es light skin. My abuela is your complexion, and she had hair past almost to her ankle. El pelo de ella, her hair was long, you know, and her husband was darker than me. He was a merchant seaman, marine seaman, and he died in that famous ship, the Cherokee. It's a famous ship, you know, way back. That was the love of her life. You know, he was dark skinned, but he had the native eyes, because they were both from Puerto Rico. So, you know, it's the mixture of us 2 people. So I practice both. For the English translation, for those who didn't understand, my father would always tell me, don't let nobody, because of the color of your skin, because you're black, that you're not native. You know, us people from the islands, we come in beautiful colors, you know, and it's a mixture of when the slaves was brought from Africa to Borinquen. Yeah, and I say we're gifted and we're blessed to be who we are, and to be proud of it. So I work both. I'm a daughter of Yamaya, 28 years, and proud. My father is Orisha Oko. I work, spiritually. I do massage. I do healings. Yeah, I like. For me, I get a lot of gratification from doing the healing work. Even if the person that out of the United States, I heard about you, I want to come and see you. So you don't have to come, just tell me what your problem is. What do you mean? What do you mean? You don't want to see me? I said, no, it's not that. Just tell me what the problem is. You give me your address, and let me have your permission, and I'll go visit you. You're going to come all the way here? And I start to laugh. No, I said, I will go there in spirit. But I asked permission because you don't want to scare nobody to death, you know. And I never say how or how they're going to see me. But most of the time, you know, the next day when I check up on them, they said they saw the eagle. They saw the eagle. I fly down there, and my wings, and when it goes like this, the heat from my hands, from my wings, engulfs them and takes away their illnesses. And I never tell people how they're going to see me, because sometimes it could be one of my other animal totems, because I can also channel the eagle, the bear, the buffalo, and the wolf. Some people get scared, you know, the first time in a native ceremony, because I work with the Shoshone people. The eagle came, and I started calling like the eagle, and people were looking up and they said, how did the bird get inside the hall? And then when I passed by, it was coming out of my mouth, and people will go into spirit. It's humbling. Again, I'll say this work is very humbling. And when I finish, I always say, I'm nobody. I'm nobody. I am what God wants me to be in this moment in time. You know, and people say, why you say that? Why you say that? You're some. I said, no, you don't understand. When it comes to the medicine, this gift, este don, what we say, este don, this gift, I don't own it. It's not a given, because I've seen people have it. And if you let your ego come in, and one day you're working and the next year you don't, because you're misusing it. You know, you got to stay humble in this. So I'm nobody. I am what God wants me to be in this moment in time. And you do the work, and then the rest, I'm Nancy. Yeah, you gotta be, you gotta separate it. You understand? You gotta separate yourself from it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So,
thank you so much for sharing. And I think it's like a perfect segue, because the title of this event is Spiritual Mediumship as Ancestral Remembrance, right? So you talked a lot about your own blood ancestors, but also not just the blood ancestors, but the bloodlines, right? That communicate through you as a medium, right? So accessing both your African and Indigenous heritage through your faculties, through your connection to the spirit world. And so I wanna invite Afimaye. Afimaye, you were born in Cuba. You come from the people who made you, your blood, your family, your parents, right? Brought you into the world are elders of more than one African, Afro-Cuban tradition. You are also a priest of more than one Afro-Cuban tradition. But you also, you have a very profound connection to the spirit world. And one of the things that Afimaye said, we have to talk about, you know, how this mission connects us and what it offers up, right, for the well-being of humanity. And I thought that was quite beautiful, because if you're trained like many of us were in the traditional spiritist, right, tradition, we say the mission is la fe, la esperanza y la caridad, right, faith, hope, and charity. So you are very much on a mission. And so I invite you to tell us, when did you discover your connection to the spirit world specifically?
So I was, when I came into this beautiful world, my mom, my parents were already in the traditions in Afro-Cuban, Lukumi, Oricha, Spiritism, Espiritismo, Cubano, from the Cuban perspective, Palo Mayombe, and various other Afro-Cuban traditions. So I was born into this. So from very early on, I was always in the presence of Espiritismo via seance, what people like to call seance, misas espirituales, because they always go down. And my mother, because I was such a great child, my mother never left me alone anywhere without nobody. I had 24/7, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, leap year too. She would never leave me behind nowhere, because I was a devil on earth. Anyway, so I had no choice but to be present wherever, you know, she would be at, right? Aside from the misas and all the religious activities that would go down in my home, right, in our home. From my mother's side, my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, they were siblings of 9. There were 9 siblings, 1 male and 8 sisters, and 8 of which one of them was my grandmother. Y todos eran espiritistas. They were all spiritists. They were all mediums. And they were very well known in the community in Cuba for the continuous spiritual activity that would go on in terms of misas and healings, which we call healing, but you know, the word wasn't existing back then. Young and things of that nature. So I grew up in this tradition, in those aspects. When did I know? I started seeing, communicating, interacting, if you will, with spirit ever since I can remember. right? But as far back as to say actively being able to call something out, I would say I was about 6 or 7 years old when I was able to actually call something out or see it in someone else. Interestingly enough, even though I was born in these traditions and these practices, my mom always wanted me to focus on school. You're gonna go to school, focus on school. You're gonna go to college. This is what you want to do, because she didn't want me to follow that path, right? She knew that it was a gift that I had. She knew it was within me. She knew I was born with it, but she didn't want me to make it a life mission per se. So I was that child who would get picked up by my school bus driver, and I would be sitting. I would be the first one getting picked up, even though school didn't start at 8 o'clock. I got picked up at 5:30 in the morning because my mom would have to go to work. My mom would have to go to work, and therefore she made arrangements for my school bus driver to be the first one to be picked up. So I would be driving around with her all over the place, picking up every other student, right? But in those rides, my little tiny butt would be, you know what, I got to tell you something. And I was like 7, 8, 9, years old. And I remember the day that I told her, your husband is going to die. And she looked through the rear view mirror. I was sitting in like 3 rows because it was a pretty big bus. I was sitting 3 rows back, and I was, with my seatbelt and what have you. And I swear I could see her right now. I see her eyeballs. They opened like she looked like an owl. And she was, ¿Qué tú dijiste? What did you say? And I said, tu marido se va a morir. And I said, your husband is going to die. That woman started bawling. Because little did I know that her husband was already in the process of being placed in hospice. I didn't know that right at that time. Here she's an adult woman listening to this child tell her that her husband is going to die. And therefore, it was just something that, even though she knew I was a child, in that particular moment, to her, she was getting a message from somewhere else. Not only did I said to her at my young age that her husband's going to die, it was more of a message of, he's going to die and you're not at fault, because she was feeling guilty for having to live the life with responsibilities and children and what have you. And she did not want to leave her husband alone. Therefore, she was carrying a lot of pressures and guilt and what have you. And the message that came through is, tú no eres culpable, tú estás bien, ya es su tiempo. You're not at fault, you're not guilty. It's already his time to release him. And she just started bawling. And she tells this adult woman, is having basically an adult-like conversation with child. Like 8 years old. But people like to refer to some of us as having an old soul. I've been hearing that ever since I can remember. He tiene un alma de viejo. He has an old soul. But that never really registered until many years later. It didn't really register. I knew what it meant, but it never really registered. So as I was growing up, this was the first of many events that would happen to me in school, with teachers, with classmates, with friends, with all over the place. I was not the typical normal child. And I did not like the typical normal things that children like. Well, children were out there playing ball or playing Atari or whatever other things were going on back there. I was trying to see what were the adults doing. I was trying to see on, especially when there was a religious spiritual activity. That was what I liked. And so I grew up in that, right? And my mom, who did not want me to dedicate myself to it, when I was already in high school, I would be the one putting the white clothes in my book bag, okay? Y le decía, mami, hoy tengo que quedarme tarde porque tengo que hacer un proyecto que tengo que entregar mañana. I have to stay late to school today because I have a project that I need to turn in tomorrow. Mentira. I was always very great friends with I would always befriend older people. I always felt an affinity with older people. And because I was my mother's son and my father's son, who were very well known in the Afro-Cuban community, everybody knew me. And I had this lady who already passed away, Natividad Torre Casanova, may her spirit always be blessed. Her daughter used to go to school with me. So I used to go to her house, and she would have misas going on, and I would say, "Ay, Afimaye, tu mamá me va a matar. Oh my God, Afimaye, your mother's gonna kill me." No, tranquila, she doesn't even know. She thinks I'm in school, doing a project or whatever. And I was 13, 12, 13, 14, and 15 years old. And I would sit in the misas with this older lady who was a great spiritist, awesome spiritist. And I would work the misas with her until the moment where, my mom, people would call her and be like, we want Afimaye to come to me. No, I didn't get it. She just had no choice but to give in. She just had no choice but to give up on the idea of restricting me from not being, because that's what spirits do, So this has always been part of me as far as back as I can remember, basically.
Beautiful.
That is beautiful.
I love that. I love that so much, because you're talking about the real life tension, right, between having a spiritual mission that you almost have no choice over, and having to manage the responsibilities and also the expectations of the material world, right? Like, Afimaye tiene que estudiar. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
And Kadi.
Yes. My story is so different from everyone else, except for Nancy. I too was very young when my parents told me, when my grandfather died, my maternal grandfather died. We used to have a plaque of his name and the funeral information, the day he was born and died, and all of that, and his name on our living room table. And my parents will always joke, remember that time your father, they would say to one another, remember that time your father spoke through her? Right? And at the time, I didn't know what they were talking about. But apparently I was calling out to my mother as my grandfather. My grandfather was speaking through me and calling out from beyond. And that's my earliest known encounter. I actually I developed as a spiritualist. My life was not connected in any way to African tradition religion. My father is Muslim. I spent years as a Muslim. I did not attend church, with the exception of hanging out with my friends for Easter and special holidays. So my experience is very different. I actually did not come. I'm the baby of the group. I actually did not come into my spiritual awakening until I was an adult. And as I look back now, right, because I've spent so many years now as an adult in this space, when I look back now, I could see all of the things, all of the signs and symbols, things I could see that no one else could see, things I could hear that no one else could hear. It's spotting unidentified objects, seeing Egun in the flesh, like all these times that I had these experiences and just kept it to myself. Not thinking that I was crazy, but I also, I was very aware of, and there was an inner knowing. I call it the inner knowing. There was awareness of the source. And to be honest with you, as a Muslim, I was able to cultivate that experience through my faith. I always tell people, you cannot not be a spiritual person and praying 5 times a day. You just can't. Anybody who says so is just not tapped in. So I was praying 5 times a day. I was performing ritual every day, basically. Performing wudu was a ritual, and then praying at sunrise several times throughout the day, and then in the evening, following all of those practices. And then in addition to that, my father is a oh my gosh, why am I losing? He's a mystic. He's a Sufi, right? So there's a whole other level there with contemplation and chanting, and my brother is also practicing as a Sufi as well. So when you're dealing with that, it takes you someplace, so I could remember telling my dad one night, I had a dream that I saw the prophet, and they were so excited. I didn't know to be excited about that. But apparently that's a big deal, to see the prophet in a dream. So I along my journey, I knew that I had gifts. Spirit basically pounced on me, because like everybody else, I wanted to do film. I had different ideas about, what my life was going to be. And then one day I woke up and I just found myself in a heap on the floor because I was like, I don't know what my life is, and I need healing, and at that point, through the advisement of my godparents, I was working with Oshun, did a lot of work with Oshun to get myself back together as a woman. There were some things that I felt that nurturing that I felt I needed. And through that work, working with Oshun, working with Egun, I found my gifts, believe it or not. Literally, I could hear things so clearly, and then I remembered how many times, because I grew up in New York. I grew up in New York during the 80s, which we all know was a very tumultuous, dangerous, crazy time. And I can remember so many times I avoided being shot at or caught in the middle of some gang war or being at the wrong place at the wrong time and always getting out. And that happened for a lot of people, right? Some of us just have good instincts and some of us can hear which way to go, which way to run, which way to duck, And so, so there were all of those things. I mean, I was the person sitting in the misa with my godfather, basically taking the notes. I had no idea that I would have this gift. And so that's a little bit about me and my gift.
Thank you, Kadi. I think something I love so much about your story is, is like that you come from a very radically different faith background, but that it's also not that radically different, right? Because you talked about your dad's Sufism. If you're a Christian, there's the charismatic sect and other sects of Christianity that also believe in prophecy and dreams and premonition and development of spiritual faculties. And across the planet, different communities and different people call it different things. But at least speaking for myself, I think it's my belief that it's something that's like universally human, and it's universally sacred and universally divine, right? It's a universally divine gift. So, whatever point in your life you came into awareness about what was possible for you, that you had these developing faculties, that you had these developing gifts, sight. Some of you are healers, you heal with your hands. Some of you are ant spirit. Some of you can see, some of you can hear, some of you can dream. Some of you have a combination of all of those things, which I think is another really important thing, is that different mediums have different faculties, but may develop multiple faculties to varying degrees. So once you started to become aware of sort of what you were capable of, what is the guidance that you received to help keep you safe, and perhaps help keep you developing or growing, but also to help you understand, to be able to distinguish between what is happening in the material world and what is happening in the spiritual world? And so I'm thinking about little Afimaye, 8 years old on the school bus, right? Where you know that what you know is real, and you know enough to share the message, and she knows enough to believe the message, right? But it's literally like a profound, life-changing conversation between a child and an adult woman who is responsible for his care, right? That fundamentally ruptures a lot of social norms, right? So how do you develop, and what guidance or train, not even training, but just what are your elders, whether they were blood elders or not, what did people teach you about how to manage this great responsibility? And anyone is welcome to answer.
I let Afimaye and then I'll go.
I was waiting for you. With me in my home, it was always customary to do spiritual baths and to cleanse yourself. So mi mamá was always una mujer que siempre te estaba santiguar. She would always be blessing you, basically. So it's a particular kind of blessing, spiritual cleanse blessing that even your own parent can do. So she was always constantly on that because she, as a medium herself, she always knew that I attracted a lot of negativity from the outside world, which is one of the major challenges, which maybe we'll talk about later, as far as challenges that we can encounter as a healer or spiritist or what have you, is the outside world and how it can affect you mentally at a mental level, at emotional level, and even at a physical level.
Right.
So I was always in a home where cleansing and spiritual cleanse and spiritual baths were a norm, right? So that's definitely was very important to keeping my energy field safe and protected from outside vibrations and people's kudos and all that stuff.
Okay. For me, it was the same thing with the baños, the baths. It was the same thing. And I remember the first time, because my mother always would go to the misas, and I was a teenager. I was 12 years old, and there was this lady there. I mean, she was real skinny, and there's a color on your skin when that has that look of death. For me, it's like a grayish,
Yes.
that grayish color, and I went into spirit and whatever plantas that they had there. Let's go to the bathroom. This is the first time that I gave a baño, but it was more like a rompimiento, because and when I ripped her clothes and you could see her bones. You could see her bones because this lady wasn't eating at all, sleeping at all. She was going. And I poured and prayed over her, and all I know is that she got her color back, and after the misa was over, she ate 3 times. So my mother taught me to a certain extent, but my eguns taught me, my higher beings, they taught me a lot in my dreams, en los sueños. I grew up with a stepfather. And when he would come home drunk and everything, my mother would leave the food ready and everything for him. And vino coger el caldero and threw it on the wall or whatever. It was a mess. And after beating my mother, we knew that we were next. And I used to have these dreams like you're falling in your dreams. You're falling like into this bottomless pit. But I would always have my ego come and swoop me up, because it's a horrible feeling. It's a horrible feeling, that falling, uno cayéndose. But then I would have the dreams where I was flying, looking down. And they say that when you travel like that, you're going to a next level. You're going to another level when you're flying and you're looking down. So I know a lot of people, the Fresh Air Fund. The Fresh Air Fund. I couldn't wait to go on those 2 weeks to be out of the city. And be in the camp and be in the woods, and for me that was my heaven. That was my salvation, And the counselor, she said, Nancy, let's go on the rowboat. I said okay. So she rows out, and we're sitting there in the middle of the lake, and she says, I know everybody calls you Giggles. They call you Giggles, but I see the sadness in your eyes. And she said, I told her what was happening at home and whatnot. And she says, lay down and close your eyes. And she said, listen to the birds. Listen to the leaves. Listen to the leaves. She put me through my first meditation. And when I got old enough as a teenager and I was on my own, I did meditation every day. I read books. I read Seth. I read Edgar Casey. They were teaching me to teach me, to teach me. And everybody says, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I want to learn too. I want somebody to tell me something." I'm a human being. I'm human also. I need too. And whether I see fire or I don't know why you're here, Nancy, because you could tell me. I said, what about me? Tell me. No, we're human. I don't know it all. But every day we're learning. Every day we're learning. But I'm blessed to be able to do the shamanic journey for everybody, and that they're being saved, and it's amazing. It's just amazing, and I thank God each and every day. Gracias a la misericordia. Like I say again, yo no soy nadie, yo soy lo que Dios me manda hacer en este momento. And keep it moving. I keep it moving. It's a blessing. It's a blessing. I don't know. I just do my best each and every day.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think there's so many rich and important points in what you shared, right? First of all, thank you for sharing so vulnerably. But I think the thing that, you all, both you and Afimaye, you talked about, spiritual hygiene, right? That people who are spiritual vessels have to be in a constant process of cleansing, right? And purification, but also connecting you to Kadi, this idea that prayer and meditation is a tool and it's a vehicle for development. And we're going to talk about spiritual development a little bit later, but I want to bring Kadi in because you actually, one of your gifts, but also it's like one of your superpowers. I think more is baths. You're a bath girl. You love baths. You love to teach people about baths
because baths help to heal me, and they transformed my intuitive gift. It helped to enhance it. It helped me to hear my ego, my spirits. It helped me to hear them clearly. And the water itself, each component of the bath is a healer. And when you mix herbs and water together, they communicate, right? And they communicate with our central nervous system to align us and to heal us. And I'm very big. Thank you, Moderator, to my godfather. He's the one who first taught me how to make a spiritual bath. And then, of course, when you receive and you initiate it, you get those initial baths. But when I was going through this awakening, that was the thing that got me through. Oshun told me, do the baths and do them this way, add this, and do it for 5 days. She had me do other things as well. But when I tell you, those baths, and even now, so my goal is I work specifically with women because we really need it. Not saying that men don't, but I just go through my lived experience. And I say to myself, if I'm dealing with this, then other women must be dealing with this too, right? So what can I do to help people really connect with themselves and really be able to tap into our own Ori? Everybody has Ori. Everybody has Egun. Everybody has spirit guides. How can we help people, no matter where they come from, to be able to tap in? And I think, we can do spiritual readings, but of course they need support. But everyone can do a bath. I have somebody here who took my class, and she says she's Haitian, so she grew up taking baths. But she didn't know how. She grew up with someone performing them on her, but she herself didn't know how to make the bath and what the process was. And so that was an amazing thing to learn, right? That I helped this person be able to now give themselves bath, and also give her children
Mhm.
if need be, or give a friend if need be, because we as practitioners know the healing benefits of spiritual baths and the empowerment, right? So for me, the bath was about fortifying me, making me stronger, and understanding the different ways that spiritual baths can help us,
Mhm.
and giving honor to the plant kingdom and the water kingdom and the mineral kingdom, right? So I teach a little bit of everything in those classes, but very important, um, you know, the work that I do is a part of my lived experience, and I wouldn't be sitting in this seat today had it not been for the guidance of Orisha and the spiritual bath work that I did and continue to do.
Not sure.
Ashe.
Not sure. So that means, if I may interject, that means that when you thought that you were just note taking, you were just a healer in preparation.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, we get a lot of inquiries at the center, and while, we don't typically, we are definitely not we take a very clear position on not being instructional. But what I will say that's really important that all of you touched upon in different ways, I think there are two things. Nancy brought in nature, and Kadi, talking about the importance of connection to nature, whether it's through prayer, meditation, and actual like physically being in it, right? As well as using with gratitude and respect the medicines of nature, herbs, water, air, all of these things. And then, both Nancy and Afimaye, you touched on in different ways the importance of, yes, spiritual hygiene, but also that the healers, the mediums, the people who are gifted, one really important thing that Nancy said, don't know everything. You only know whatever God gave you that day. You and Nancy was like, this is what I am in this moment, and this is what God is giving me to bless you with in this moment. That doesn't mean you're all knowing all the time, right? We're still humans, we're vessels. And then the second thing that both of you touched upon of great importance is just this idea of like how not just spiritual hygiene, but spiritual healing. Right. And in Nancy's case, she's like, I want somebody to tell me something. Right. And then in Afimaye's mom, Mafere fue la madre, right? I'm having like all types of mirroring happening, because I have a child who's a priest of Chango and he was going through everything Afimaye went through, where I'm like, vamos al baño, es antiguo, pa aquí, pa allá, límpiate, and he's so sick and tired. But I was tired of my elders when I was a kid too.
Yes.
Right. I was like, I don't want to do this. You got to do this. Right. Until the day that you realize, oh yeah, I got to do this. So, I think what you're touching on is like both that there's almost a system of checks and balances, right? Because what that brings us to is that there's a collective responsibility. Kadi sitting at the table taking notes for her godfather, right? Every little act is interdependent and reliant on the presence and contributions of everyone around us, right? So I'd love for you all to talk about that. A lot of people often ask, well, I feel like I have these premonitions or I have these dreams. How do I develop? How do I grow? And, what I always say is like, sit your butt in the chair and pray, or go outside and pray, or, there's no human being that's going to develop you necessarily, right? There are some things, but it's ultimately what Nancy said. Her spirit guides guided her. They gave her instruction, and all of you in different ways had people that also came into your life to offer specific types of guidance. What do you say to folks that have this question? How do I develop, and how do I develop safely? But also, what is the importance of being in community, of collective, of all of those things that you all in different ways touched upon?
I always ask people, what kind of impact do you want to have, right? Because a lot of times people don't really know what they really mean when they're saying that they want to grow spiritually. They don't really know what that entails. They don't know what they're
Ashe.
asking for. They just are emulating, or they see other people doing it and they want to do it,
Ashe. Ashe.
or they just don't, that's primarily what I see. But then there are people who have gifts, and they will come to you, and you can tell when people are a little bit further down the road because they know how to be quiet. They know how to listen. And there are certain things that are required before you can develop spiritually. And that was the biggest thing for me. Like I had to be quiet. I had to get quiet. And I lived in New York City, in Brooklyn. How is that possible? How am I going to get quiet? So that's the first thing I ask people, okay, what do you want to do with that? What exactly do you, I like to let's get clear. And so, as a person who does readings, spiritual readings, people come to you because they want to do that, but then their spirit guides are saying something different. So then it becomes an issue of, let's clear out some of this muck first, because Ia was talking about trauma. A lot of us have trauma that needs to be cleared up. You can't start your journey until you got to clean things out a little bit.
Sure.
And I wish sorry to take off, but there were some things that I wish that I understood or knew before I started my journey. Like I wish that I had understood Ori a little bit more. I wish I had a stronger mindset, an understanding of how mindset is so important in what we do. Yeah.
Sure. I believe that, Ashe and Light and Progress and Muhi Brodesu for everything that Soul Sister here, Kadi, is saying. Because what I experience is that people want to do the work because it feels or looks to them like something cool to do. It looks to them like it's if she's doing it, if he's doing it, this is I want to, especially now in the day of the social media presence world, right, where everything is put out in social media. So they think, or they believe, or they come in with the false understanding that it's going to give them the attention that they don't get at home, the attention that they don't receive in their private life, the attention that they've never been able to get from mama and daddy. I'm going to get attention from the world because all I have to do is read 3 books from the Botanica, take 2 online classes, and now I am a healer. And it doesn't work like that, because the healer that does not know how to really put his or her gift to work in a divine way will become a curse. And if it doesn't become a curse for you, it becomes a curse for your family members. It becomes a curse for your child. It becomes a curse for somebody around you. So you have to understand, what are you asking for? Because when you're asking for to be a medium, to be a healer, how do I use my gift? How do I use my gift? You got to know that using your gift comes with ups and lows. It comes with pros and cons. It comes with beautiful days where you feel, wow, I love you, Orisha, for being able to do, save this person's life. But it also comes with the part where Orisha says, or Spirit says, or Egun says, this is not for you, or I can't help you, or this is not your path, but this is not an obligation. People want it to be an obligation, like something you can go to Walmart and buy a pair of pants. It doesn't work like that. So there has to be, what I believe, number one is the ability to be obedient. People do not like obedience. Why they don't like obedience? Because they don't like rules. If you don't like rules, and if you don't like obedience, this path that you think is for you, it ain't for you. So you have to understand that there's some things that you want to do that you won't be able to do. And there's some things that you maybe think that you won't be able to do that you're supposed to do. But it comes from being able to, as we say, back in the day, when I was growing up, when I was a little child, when I heard elders speak, mira, oye, y calla. You look, you listen, and you keep your mouth shut. Because at the end of the day, there's so much to learn. And beloved, Sister Nancy, I hope she comes back on. she says something very important, about the fact that I don't know nothing. And I agree with that because, I don't know everything, she said. When I was growing up, the elders that I grew up around always used to say, yo no sé nada. I don't know anything. Now, I just don't know nothing, because the issue that I see these days is that people want to come in with, I know. No, you don't know. Because those of us that might know something, we're still learning and we're still perfecting certain things. And the things that I knew today that could have helped me today are not the same things that are going to help me tomorrow. So whatever I think I know could be outdated a month from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now.
Right.
So this whole idea of wanting to know, we have to first understand that the first lesson is, I don't know nothing.
Nothing.
And I'm not in control.
Exactly.
People always say, "Oh, why don't you put your classes online, record them, and put them online?" I said, because it may not be the same next time, and maybe I learned something new, and maybe what I taught was wrong. I'm humble enough to admit that. We're constantly learning. We're constantly finding new information. We're constantly growing and learning. And that should be something that's at the forefront. People think that you switch on a light and you have this thing. They think it's magic.
Exactly.
They think what we do is magic.
That's
and
true.
it
It's
isn't.
not.
It isn't
That's
magic.
true. That's true. I say, and it's very important to also know that, though one of the hardest lessons, I don't know if I can talk about this right now, but one of the hardest lessons that as a medium or clairvoyant or as a healer or as a practitioner of any ATR, in my personal opinion, is that sometimes in the process of being able to turn on the light for someone else, you still are in search of your own light. So therefore, when people think that this is a know all for all, no, it's not. Because sometimes you're turning on that light switch for somebody else while you still have to come home and say, how do I turn my own light on? That's why I understand perfectly what Nancy were saying, because it's like, hello, can you tell me? I'm human too. Can you tell me something? Because I'm one of those that I go to misa and nobody tells me shit. Oh, Afimaye Galarraga. No, I'm an espiritista.
Me
but,
too.
Hello, I'm also a human.
Me too.
So therefore, I've already, at this point in stage of my life, I've given up on going to a misa where I think I'm going to be told anything, because at the end of the day, nobody tells me anything, and when it do, it's just very vague, because they don't feel like I need it because I am an espiritista. No, I am a human espiritista, okay? Which means, let's not forget the human part. The human is, I have flaws, I have imperfections, I have lessons to learn, I make mistakes, I don't know it all, I have lessons to learn. That's the human part, okay? The espiritista is the gift that God has decided to turn the light on so that I can pass it on to somebody else. But the human me is still very much alive. Can you tell me something? Hello?
Yeah.
Well, I have a theory about that. I think that there's certain things that they want us to learn on our own, right? Because it's part of our evolution as well. And I think so, to that point around sort of our spiritual evolution, right? Because I have a teacher who is she's an indigenous Nahua teacher who taught me about Sobos, Aztec, Nahuatl traditional massage, hand healing, and La Doctora Crescencia. And, she always talks about her indigenous community and las culturas milenarias, right? So basically all of the ancient cultures of the world and how they're united around this idea of our spiritual evolution. And so much of this work is around helping everyone at the table to evolve. And so while acknowledging all that you have said, which is humility, the importance of humility, obedience, the importance of surrender on some level, right? And surrendering to the idea that we don't know everything, among other things. And so what are the rights? And Nancy, we're trying to get in touch with. So I just want to say for our viewers that we did lose connection with Nancy, but we're trying to bring her back. What are your thoughts around the responsibilities? And Afimaye, you started to touch on the challenges, right, that present for us. And we have, it's actually a perfect sort of segue, because we have a brother, Kevin Green, who's asking, what is the cost to the medium of working spiritually for other people when they are unprepared? right? So connected to this theme of sort of, sitting in our humility, obeying spirit, knowing what we don't know, right? Is also like, what are the risks associated? If you do work that you are unprepared for. And then more broadly, what are the responsibilities that we have, right? How do you manage when sometimes you're given information that is so deeply significant to other people's lives?
If I may.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I'm the baby in the group. And I think if you're young, pardon?
I'm like, no, I'm just kidding.
No, definitely an elder, but a spiritual baby. And, as someone who I had come from a wonderful, large community of spiritualists. And but I know when I'm in over my head, and I think it's important to remove ego from this practice. So if somebody comes to me and they need a babalao, I'm clear about that. Spirit is going to let me know that, and I'm going to resource out. And I think it's so important to have community and build and know who you can call on when you need help with clients, but I think a lot of times the ego won't allow people to do that. But I think that's why community is so important in this practice, right? We here as Lukumi practitioners, we're birthed into community. And so that's one of the things is, resources, using your community, not allowing ego to take over. But also, I think for me being new into this space, I'm very, very careful about, who I work with. I'm very keenly aware of when I'm not a good fit for somebody, and again, it requires a lot of humility on my part, but also compassion. And I listen to my spirit guides.
Sure. Lose. With me, I like to always go back to basics with everything. If we're going to call ourselves mediums, well, let's first understand what is a medium. What is a medium? Because for those of us, for myself, that grew up in this, it's very easy to fall into I'm doing what my mama taught me, what my grandma taught me, what I saw Padrino do, what I saw Madrina do. But do you really understand what you're doing, though? You're doing what you saw, and you are doing it to the best of your abilities. But do you understand the root of what it is? And I've always pushed myself to try to understand to the best of my abilities. I'm not perfect at it, but I try my best to understand. Though I come from old school teachings, some elders that did things correctly, and they were taught by great elders themselves, what have you. But what is it that I am doing aside from the ABCs? Why am I really doing? And with me, mediumship, since this is our topic, with mediumship, we know that is, to me, I personally define it as the mediator between obviously the physical world, right? The living and the spirit living. I don't call it the dead, because the spirit, they're not dead. They're just in a different dimension. So I don't call it the dead. It's between the physical living and the spirit living, being that mediator. But being that mediator also means that I will never know more than spirit. No matter how much I think I know, I will never know more than spirit. So what is the first thing, in my opinion, or the first situation where people that want to fall into this path, they betray themselves? They betray themselves when they think that they are spirit, when they think that their ability is the law, or that their way is the only way. When in reality, you are just a mediator, mediumship. You're a mediator. You're a mediator between two different worlds. that you're supposed to try to balance without losing yourself. Because another betrayal that you can fall into is when you think that you are the it, then obviously you're not being receptive. You're not being open. You're not being an open container to receive what the other side is trying to communicate for you, for your family, or for the people that come to you. When you do that, you already are acting against the rules, or against, I don't want to call it rules, but I do want to call it against the moral values that mediumship really brings to the table. If I personally, as an Afro-Cuban man, I follow the Allan Kardec school of thought, and I follow el espiritismo cardenciano, the Kardecist spiritism practice. And there are definitely guidelines that we have to abide by in order for us to keep walking this path. And one of them is, you are not spirit. And one of it also is, Allan Kardec used to say that you're supposed to put to the test what you think you're receiving. You can't think that you are, just receiving something, because you can be receiving things from all kinds of vibrations, all kinds of energies, all kinds of different entities. So you have to be able to put it to the test. So that, actually, he used to say that when in doubt, you must abstain from saying anything to people or trying to act out on it. And he also used to say, when a new idea arises in your mind, you're supposed to be able to subject it to reason, right? You're supposed to subject it to reason, because if you don't subject it to reason, if something does not make sense and it cannot be proven, then it will not be helpful for you, nor anyone else that you're supposed to guide. Because there are what we call in Cuban espiritismo, espíritus hulones, charlatanes, mentirosos, spirits that are of low vibrations, charlatans, liars. There are all kinds of different vibrations. So you're supposed to be able to know which kind of energy you're working with.
Sure.
Absolutely. I appreciate you bringing that forth. What do you think? Is there a code of ethics? You started to talk about this a little bit using the Kardecian sort of guidelines, but are there other ethical codes? We started to touch on this a little bit, and we welcome as well from the audience. So if you're viewing with us live, please start to put your questions into the chat. We are happy to bring those questions forward. We talked a little bit about technology, right? And you started to touch a little bit on, what technology has done and how it's impacted people's desire to show up in this way, right? Because there's a growing popularity, there's growing access, there's the growing possibility of being in connection with more people from more places, right? What, if any, is the ethical code, or are some ethical guidelines that people should bear in mind, given the delicate and complex nature of what it is to serve spiritually? You've started to touch on it, but are there other things?
Yes,
yes,
definitely. With the practice of espiritismo, with mediumship, number one, the first lesson, and I try to teach this also in my classes, and I have different courses that are coming up that I teach this, and where though we refer to terms of being a spiritual being, having a human experience, we are a spirit. We can't forget that we are a spirit. This is just the body, the flesh, the vehicle that we're in, disguising the spirit that emanates through us. So we are a spirit ourselves. And what happens is also that we have to learn that in how I'd like to teach it, every part of us, we are the prayer. We are a walking piece of the prayer. It means that our thoughts, our behaviors, our actions, our ideas, how we approach humanity, the work that we do with people, how we are with our family, that is all part of a prayer that can either elevate us, promote us, enlighten us, or keep us in the dark. So if you don't look at yourself as the prayer, sometimes we go, oh, I want to pray to God, I want to pray to Spirit, I'm praying to this, and it's not being granted what I'm praying, or I want to light a candle, or no, we are the candle, we are the prayer, we are the meditation, we are it in ourself, in our body. So therefore, there needs to be first a responsibility that we bring to the table when we go to, in my case, when we go to a misa. When I go to a misa, I gotta leave the human Afimaye out, the imperfect Afimaye out, the moody Afimaye, because I'm moody as hell. The moody Afimaye out. I gotta leave the me out so that I can open this vessel to become the messenger, the mediator between the living, the physical living with the world that we're in, and the spirit living. I'm the mediator, so I'm that voice. So I have to leave my humanness outside. So what the heck does that even mean? How do you even leave? How you're able to separate yourself from being human? When you have issues, you have home, you probably have someone sick at home, you have a child to raise, you have a job, you have a boss that's up your ass that's driving you crazy. You have things that are really happening to you in the real world. Well, number one, the issue, and I don't want to. I hope I'm not going all over the place in replying to your answer, but to your question. But when we call ourselves medium, we have to understand that I'm the medium for the world. I am the medium for humanity, because mediumship, if we understand it through the teachings of Allan Kardec, mediumship is for the world. It's not for you. And the problem is that the people that want to learn how to do this, they're doing it for the ulterior motives, right? And their own personal gains that they want. But that's not what the mediumship that I know, humbly speaking, is not for me, it's for the world. It's because mediumship is about service. Mediumship is about guidance. Mediumship is about giving. So you already are in contradiction with yourself when you come into this practice and you say you want to embody your gifts, but then yet you're doing it from a place of, I'm the king, my word, I want the attention, all eyes on me, because that's just the ego. That's just the ego acting out.
Yeah.
Or, as Allan Kardec would say, that's your low vibrational energy that's acting out through you, that you haven't enlightened, that you have not taken into the light, right? That you have not really elevated. So therefore, we have to understand that the ethics is, this is not for control. This is not for abuse. This is not to get rich. This is not, to be living off of people. This is not about you. This is not about you filling up your pockets. This is it. This is not, and I say this all the time, this is not about you living off of the suffering of other brothers and sisters. There's a big problem with that, because we are in a day and age, and I'm going to be as blunt as I know how to be, because I don't know how to be another way. I'm a son of Shango, and I just can't be any other way, right? Back in the day, what day am I speaking about? Back in the 1800s, Espiritismo came to Cuba, in 1857 and 1859, and there are two different stories or variations as to how Espiritismo got to Cuba. But we're not going to get into all that story. But back in those days, in the late 1800s, Espiritismo, in reality, in all honesty, was not charged. Vamos a hablar claro, okay? Because it was a service that you are a representative, you are a physical representation of spirit on earth to guide and give light and support, right? So muchos viejos de antes, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, no cobraban, they wouldn't charge, right?
In 2010.
Exactly.
Okay.
Not that long ago.
So many of us, we have to understand that there are different parts to that, right? Because many elders then in the 1900s, late 1900s, 1970s to present day, yes, they started, cobrando or asking for something in return because this is taxing, this is debilitating. This can definitely put you in a place where you're giving more to the world than you are giving to yourself, which is definitely another part of code of ethics. There needs to be balance, right? There's a need for balance, energetic, mental, spiritual, physical balance. So therefore, there are a lot of things that it's a composite of different parts. It's not just black and white. It's not just one thing. And with mediumship, it is important for us not to lose our humility. And if there's one thing that Spirit always teaches me, ever since I can remember and continues to teach me, Spirit will humble you when you least expect it. Spirit, the universe, God, Mother Earth, I don't care what people want to call it these days. It will humble you, okay? It will definitely humble you. Because if you don't humble yourself in this particular practice, then you are not being the medicine that you're supposed to be.
Thank you. And I want to welcome back Ian Nancy.
We did miss you.
Everybody was like, where's Ian Nancy?
The baby had stepped on the wire, the connection to the computer.
Aww.
So it's charging up now. So I don't know how long that I have, but it's charging and I'm back on. But I want to piggyback on what you said, Afimaye said, and that's why my spirit says I am what Spirit wants me to be in that moment of time, because that's what keeps us humble, and that's what keeps us, when we come into the misa or to do something, and especially when your phone is ringing all the time. They say, "How do you do that?" I said, "Do what?" He said, "You go into Spirit and you." I said, "Because you're asking me those kinds of questions, so I gotta put me in that space in my head." You understand? So, yeah, it's when that I'm writing a book, and for people to understand. So when I'm talking to you, I'm talking to what walks behind you. When you're talking to me, it's the same thing. You see, and we go into that zone, and that's it. And that's it. But I want to, when I came in, somebody had wrote about to just work for, or just for your circle, or do you work for? I read that. All I want to say to that, we're not God. If we're asked, I don't play God. If you ask me, then I'll tell you. I don't go to somebody in the street and say, "Oh, this and this and this and this and that," and tell you. I got to ask them for your permission for me to tell you something if I'm picking up on something. I don't play God with nobody. But if it's something important for that needs to be said, I ask for your permission.
Absolutely.
Not everybody may want to hear it, and you could be in a store waiting online to pay for your stuff, and somebody behind you will start, talking to you and and you listen. So you listen. And all they want to hear is, "Oh, okay, yeah, it's gonna be okay."
That's it.
That's all they want. There's somebody to talk to them because their kids are somewhere they're not being paid attention to. They have nobody to talk to you. Todo va a estar bien. No te preocupes, mija. That's
The
it.
easiest thing that we can do
Simple.
as mediums is show compassion. And that seems to be so hard for so many to do. Showing compassion doesn't cost a dime. It doesn't cost you any money to be that way.
Exactly.
And I lead with that because a lot of people come to you and they're in pain. They have experienced trauma. They're confused, and even though we don't know all the answers every time, we still can give them what Spirit gives us and show them compassion and let them leave feeling as though they are cared for. And for my practice, I think that is very important. And when I see a lot of people, we're talking about technology, and I see people, out here badgering people who come to them for help, it makes me very uncomfortable. It makes me very uncomfortable because I believe that part of the ethics is that we treat people with respect, right? No matter what walk of life they come from, we treat them with respect. and dignity.
Ashe, ashe, ashe.
So we only have about 5 minutes before we wrap. So I'd like you all to think about a final thought, that you want to share with your viewers. We also have some requests for if there are ways or things that you'd like them to know, websites or contact information. And while you think about all of that, I want to just uplift that in the chat, we have a lot of folks commenting, and so you can respond to this as well. We have a lot of folks commenting on this question of whether or not people pay for spiritual services. And Afimaye was giving us like some historical background. And, I think we can also say that customarily, one of the things that has changed is that typically, at least even when I was growing up in the Bronx, you had like people in your community that were offering these services, right? Afimaye used to go to Doña Natividad after school because she was in his community, right? We live in a very different world now, right? And so people are asking people to cross geographies and borders and travel and go places. And customarily, even when you didn't pay, you had the ethical obligation, at least I was always raised, you bring something to the spirits out of gratitude, right? If they helped you. And so, there's this question beyond ethics of values. People are kind of in the discussion talking about, well, is it old school or new school? Do you charge? Do you not charge? I'd love you to just respond to that, not so much in the if there's a one way or another, but in terms of like the values, right? We've talked about service. Afimaye uplifted the importance of being of service. All of you have talked about that, being of service in different ways: humility, compassion, obedience, respect, right? These are the themes of the life. I think there's another one we haven't talked about, which is like reciprocity, right? And not so much with humans, but with the spirits, right? And so when you talk about, ethics and values, I'd ask you, is there what responsibility do we have, not just to our mission, but what responsibility do you have to the spirits?
Well, if I may, we have a symbiotic relationship with our spirits. So therefore, as much as we are here, because Spiritism, mediumship believes in reincarnation. Reincarnation is real, right? We don't even have time to get into that, because reincarnation was literally taken off the Bible. It was literally erased, taken, redacted, whatever you want to call it. But reincarnation is real. So therefore, we are here in this human flesh because there was some kind of unfinished business. There were some things that were undone, unfinished, not learned, right? So come back so we can learn that. But we have a symbiotic relationship with our spirit guides and our entities, because they depend on us as much as we depend on them. So we have to attend to them. We have to give them light. We have to comply with whatever, our offerings on whatever they require of us, which can come up at any particular point. And I want to go back very, very, very briefly on this, because, I said what I said, and I know the history of Afro-Cuban Spiritism, and at least in what respects to Cuba, and it might have seemed like I opened a can of worms, but I'll tell you this: the whole concept of charging. Let's not talk about whether it's new school, because I saw a comment there that it's new school. It's not necessarily new school, because let's understand what new school is. Is new school the 2000s? Is new school the 1900s? What is considered new school? Because misas have been spiritual work and misas and all kinds of spiritual work have been charged for a very long time now, right? And we're also in a day and time where your own spirit guides and your own oricha and your own guardian angel sometimes comes through and says, you can do things for free, or there needs to be some kind of an even exchange, or there needs to. So therefore, we need to, if you're going to talk about, well, we don't church in our house. Well, I'm the kind of person that have always done misas de desarrollo espiritual, spiritual development misas in my house, and I don't charge people to come to my spiritual development misas, and anybody that wants to come, the door is open. But if you're going to call me I live in California where distances are super long. So if you're going to call me to be stuck in traffic for 2 hours to go to your home and put myself in the hands of spirit to be able to give you the healing that your life needs. And you are 9 times out of 10 the kind of person that won't drive back to even show your appreciation from spirit, and won't even take a candle or flowers, or won't even buy something for your spirit guides, because people don't do that these days. People are give me. People take, but they don't appreciate. You best believe that your spirit guides and your guardian angel are at a point where it says your energy that comes through us cannot be abused. So if somebody needs something of you, they will have to pay, because they will have to pay, because you know what? They're the same people that won't think about buying a $500 Coach bag. And they won't think about, and they won't think about spending $2,000 or $3,000 over the weekend in Disney World or Disneyland, right? So there's absolutely nothing wrong with charging. My rule of thumb is, it's not about what people charge. It's about things being done ethically, being done right, and you being able to see the positive effect in your life for what was done. Because you know what? If my spirit guide comes into your house and I was able, through my own spirit energy, whatever, save your daughter or your son from committing suicide, there's no price that you can put on that. Absolutely no price that you can put on that. So we are too hung on, I don't charge, and this is be for free, but people don't appreciate, and people don't really show their appreciation and the respect and the value for the things that walk with you.
Luz.
Ashe.
Luz. You know,
No, Nancy, I mean, on that note, we actually do have to close. So I want to give each of you an opportunity. For a final thought, right? I mean, we just got into the heat of it, but that said, all that means is that there are many seeds for future discussions, right? There are many more discussions to be had. So I wanna formally thank you, for joining us this evening. I want to thank all of our viewers. I want to again encourage you to support the Caribbean Cultural Center African Diaspora Institute, cccadi.org. And I want to thank our panelists for such a rich discussion. And with that, I'll leave each of you with a word, sort of the burning thought, the final thought for this evening that you want to impart. And I'm going to go to Ian.
I just want to say real quick about reciprocity. A lot of people, especially when it comes to Misa, and the times we're living in now, especially, where people are killing each other because they have no food to feed their families. We're in the pandemic. So much is being taken away from these people. The rich people is off by themselves and they don't want to pay their shares. And it falls on the poor people and the people who are trying to get by. They come here, they do, but I make sure, by muerto, flower, cigar, una botella de ron, even if it's a small one, something. Because some may bring a big bottle of it, it's okay, y la vela, porque un día que tú no estás aquí, tú me vas a llamar for something else. Entonces no te preocupes, mijo, mija, yo tengo aquí, voy a rezar en tu nombre. Because it continues. It doesn't stop when you do that healing for just that time. That ego knows you, and that ego knows what you brought to it. And I could take out of that bottle. So people come in, oh, you got all this liquor, you got this rum. I say, honey, that's not for you. That's his. That's his. First of all, I don't drink. I don't allow nobody drinking in my house. Eso del muerto. So that it's not only that one time. Yeah, I even put an initial on the bottle. Que fue fulano de tal y el negro. Eso, papá, fulano de tal. Papá, por favor, y vela. Because I buy candles, and I always have candles because somebody will call for, and they give them the prayer, and that's it. That little thing that you brought goes a long way with Egun.
Yes, sure.
And then when they come from an hour and a half from the city, they come over here, and what you say is true. Gas has gone up, or everything, tolls have gone up. Nancy, here's a little extra. I'm sending it to you now. Now it's no longer wait till they get it. I'm sending you Zelle or PayPal or something. ¿Tú vas a cocinar? Yo compro el pernil. They send me extra because they want me to cook for them. And you have to, so they could be grounded, so they could go back to the city safe and sound. You see, so it's no longer the old days where they traían un pollo or the thing, We're not, they're bartering, and you could still barter these days. they call me from outside the United States, I do the above, whether they have or they don't. Porque viene otro y yo te da algo, una sorpresa.
Exactly. Exactly.
God compensates you. Y con eso todo el mundo, I love being on here, love meeting everybody, and I hope we all stay in touch with each other. And I hope that the people who came in are satisfied with all the answers that we all gave.
Ashe.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback off of what you're saying in terms of reciprocity. I do believe that it's time for us as a people, as spiritualists, to start also changing our idea about wealth in our community, because you know, we need institutions, you know, like CCCADI, right? We need more of that. We need more institutions, and we are the ones that bring the people in, and we should be able to acquire wealth for what we do, because what we do is also God's work. Look at how much money the church makes. Look at how much money these mosques, you know, how much money they're making. So we really need to change, you know, for somebody to make Santo is a lot of money. You know, a lot of investment has gone in, and I get educated beyond just Santo. I still am constantly doing continued education. So I think we need to start changing our mindset around wealth. But finally, I just wanted to say, there was someone who asked about mediumship and that they want to help people. My advice for anyone coming into and trying to develop their gift is to really think about, and I've said this several times tonight, but to really think about the kind of impact that you want to make, right? Because we have enough people here online and all over the place doing things, right? So really coming in this time and age, if you want to help people, really think about, and at that point, take it to your guides, take it to Egon, sit with them, and work it out that way. First, understand what you're coming into, and that's my final. It was so great being on this panel with you all. It's just amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm appreciated to be here too myself. My last thought is, you know, for those people that are confused or uncertain about what mediumship really is and how it plays an important role in our life, perhaps in a future panel that we have, we can discuss how the biology of mediumship, right? Because if we understand mediumship at a different level, you know, there are a lot of things, traits, behaviors, traumas, fears, uncertainties that are passed down, and it's been now proven scientifically that these things live in people's genome, right, in your genes, and it can be passed. Traumas, fears, uncertainty, things that we don't understand, it can be passed down. So therefore, mediumship serves as the ability to be able to heal and uplift and enlighten the ancestors that left this earthly plane without being able to understand how they could have become a better human being, and we are able to leave this world better than what we were able to find it. So with me, you know, mediumship is how we honor our ancestors and how we honor ourselves in our mind, body, spirit, and soul. And it's also, to me, God's expression of God's love for us, because God said, you know, through mediumship, I'm sending you down there to earth, but I'm not sending you alone. I'm sending you with the ability to still commune with us, with the spirit world, so that you can have the support and the guidance to be able to continue this path. So I hope that we can come, you know, together again, hopefully, and soon. I would definitely love to connect with Nancy, and definitely with Sister Kadi. With me, you know, I can always be found on Instagram under @spiritual.Dr. Afi. That's my handle on Instagram, @spiritual.Dr. DOCTOR Afi AF. Because we are here truly to serve.
Mari, you give everybody the for each other the list so we can all stay in contact.
Yes,
absolutely. And so, and I want to uplift, because a lot of folks are like, how do we meet them? How do we find them? So again, you can find Spiritual Dr. Afi, Afimaye Galarraga at spiritualdoctorafi.com. You can find Kadi Janna at thepleasurealchemy.com. And Nancy, I don't know if you want to share
Email,
your
yeah,
email,
the email,
or
yeah.
your email, Eagle77.
Eagle Diva
Diva
7 at AOL.
Eagle
Yeah.
Diva 7 at AOL.com to
my
subscribe
Yemaya
to her
sister.
demonic sessions. That's right. Thank you all for being with us this evening. May you be safe. May you be blessed. And may you find whatever it is you need for your
Thank
highest
you.
good,
Thank you.
people.
Good
Have a
night,
good night.
everybody.
Thank you.